And we're going to continue working on the Studying Pedigrees assignment. We are working on figuring out the genotypes of our family members on our pedigree here. Having the white forelock is a dominant trait, so anybody who has that trait, anybody who shaded in has that white forelock trait, and would have to have a big letter F. Anyone who is showing the recessive trait of not having the white forelock will have to be homozygous recessive, would have to have two little f's. So we know that Dad here is little f, little f. We know that Mom has at least one big F, but at this point we don't know if she's big F, or big F, little f. So we have to look at our children. All of our children down here, our offspring, that do not have the trait, they have to be little f, little f. Okay, so she's got, this was her daughter that did not have the trait, so she was little f, little f. This is her son who did not have the trait, and he's little f, little f. So Dad can only give little f, so if they're little f, their second little f would have had to have come from Mom. So therefore we know that Mom has to be heterozygous, big F, little f. And it's a situation, again, where some of the offspring have the trait, some of the offspring do not have the trait. So in a test cross, remember, if it says some have it, some do not, then that means that the unknown parent showing the dominant trait would have to be heterozygous for that trait. And it's a test cross again because this parent is little letter, homozygous, recessive, and then the unknown parent is showing the dominant trait, but we did not know the full genotype. Okay, and then we have this daughter right here who is showing the trait. It's a dominant trait, so we know she has to have a big F. Then we know that Dad could only give her a little f, so she has to be big F, little f. Again, we also could have figured that out because she has some offspring with the trait and some offspring without the trait. Okay, so this child from this couple, we know that he has one big F because he's got the dominant trait, and then Dad here can only give a little f, so this one has to be big F, little f. Okay, this one is showing the recessive trait of normal hair, so that would have to be little f, little f. And this, let's see something, has to be little f, and this daughter here is also showing the recessive trait and would have to be little f, little f. Okay. So up here also this son was showing the dominant trait, so I had to have a big F, and then Dad could only give the little f, so that one would have to be big F, little f. This person is recessive, so little f, all their offspring, all they have to give are little f's, and they're both showing the recessive traits, so they all have to be little f, little f. Okay. This one we know would also have to be little f, little f. This one would have to have a big F because it's showing the trait, but then Mom here could only give a little f, so it has to be big F, little f. And same for this one, big F and little f. Our next question says, what's the most likely genotype of individual A? Individual A was Mom here, so Mom was big F, little f. And then individual C was Dad, who's showing the recessive trait, so he had to be little f, little f. Big F, little f here, and little f here. Example 1, tracing the path of an autosomal recessive trait. So this pedigree is looking at a recessive trait this time. And the trait is Fanconi's anemia. So the dominant form of is normal bone marrow function, in other words, no anemia. The recessive form is having Fanconi anemia. Individuals affected will show slow growth, heart defects, possible bone marrow failure, and a high rate of leukemia. So typical pedigree for a family that carries Fanconi anemia is shown below, and it says, note that the carriers are not indicated by the half color shade. So it doesn't tell us who the carriers are. We'll have to kind of figure that out for ourselves. And it is a recessive trait. So in order to have that trait, it would have to be little f, little f. So we know that one's little f, little f. We know this one would have to be little f, little f. Tells us here Carla is little f, little f. Tom over here would have to be little f, little f. And then all these who do not have the trait, we know would have to have at least one big F. And we'll have to figure the other ones out from there. Sandra has at least one big F because she is showing the dominant trait. Sam is showing the dominant trait, and it tells us already that Sam is big F, little f. Anna here would have to have at least one big F. Michael would have to have at least one big F. And then Daniel's big F, little f. Alan has to have at least one big F. Tina here would have to have at least one big F. And then Christopher tells us down here is as a big F. And we don't know what the other is. Okay, so see if we can figure out anything else from here. Well, we have Arlene, who's little f, little f. And then we have George, who is showing the dominant trait is big F question mark. So this, again, is a test cross. We have a recessive parent and a dominant parent that we need to know. Are they heterozygous or homozygous? Well, they have some children with the trait and some children without the trait. So again, we have some and some. So these little f children would have had to, mom could give them one of their little f's, but dad would have had to give them the other. So he would have to have a big F and a little f. And Anna here came from these parents. Dad only has Dad would have to give the big F because mom doesn't have a big F to give. So mom could only give a little f. So Ann has to be big F, little f. Okay, so if she's big F, little f, they have Carla, who has the recessive trait little f, little f. So if she is little f, mom gave one of those little f's, so dad would have had to also have a little f to give her. So he would have to be big F, little f as well. Okay, over here we have Tom showing the trait. Tom is little f, little f. Okay, and Tom can only give little f's. We know that Daniel had to get a big F from mom because dad didn't have one to give. And dad gave that little f. Alan would have had to have gotten the big F from mom. Dad, Tom could only give a little f. So Alan would have to be big F, little f. Okay, we don't know for sure if Sandra is big F, little f or big F, big F. She does have two offspring that got a big F from her, but that's only two, so that's not enough to know for sure whether or not she is homozygous or heterozygous. So that's about all we can definitely figure out on this one. Let's see what our questions say. Number one says, what is Arlene's genotype? So Arlene is mom up here, so she is FF. And George's dad is big F, little f. Arlene is little f, little f. George's dad, he was big F, little f. What are Ann and Michael's genotypes? Ann and Michael are both big F, little f. We figured that one out because they both have the dominant trait, but they had an offspring with the recessive trait, so they both had to be able to give a little f. So Ann and Michael are both big F, little f. Most likely Sandra's genotype is, Sandra's this one right here, and most likely, well, all of her offspring had the big F from her. But there's only two offspring, so we can't really know. I think two offspring is not really enough to say for sure because they always will have a 50-50 chance of getting a big F from her, even if she's big F, little f. But if you're looking at the fact that all of her offspring had it, we could say she's big F, but I would not even venture a guess yet since she has only had 2 offspring, but for the sake of this, we'll put big F, little f, but not sure at all. She could be big F a little bit. As long as she's got that one big F, she could make 2 babies with a big F. So list 3 people from the chart other than George that are most likely carriers of Fanconi anemia. That means they would show the dominant trait but still have a gene that they could pass on. So Sam would be a carrier, Ann would be a carrier, Michael would be a carrier. So Sam, Ann, and Michael. We could also list Arlene if we wanted to, and Daniel. We'll just go with Sam, Ann, and Michael right now. You put the others if you want to list the others. Example 2, tracing the path of an autosomal dominant trait. So this time it's dominant. The trait is neurofibromatosis. So a dominant form of neurofibromatosis is caused by the production of an abnormal form of the protein neurofibromin. Affected individuals show spots of abnormal skin pigmentation and non-cancerous tumors that can interfere with the nervous system and cause blindness. Some tumors can convert to a cancerous form. So the recessive trait is the normal protein. In other words, no neurofibromatosis. So a typical pedigree for a family that carries neurofibromatosis is shown below. And note that the carriers are not indicated with half colored. We're going to use the letter N to indicate the dominant neurofibromatosis allele and little n for the normal allele. Okay, so person number 1 here has the trait. And it says it's the dominant, so we know that this person would have a big N. Because they're showing that dominant trait, so we know they have at least one big N. This one is not showing the trait, so this one had to be little n, little n. They're showing the recessive trait of normal fibromin. This one also is not showing the trait, so we know this offspring would have to be little n, little n. This offspring would have to have a big N because they're showing the trait, but then Dad here can only give the little n, so they would have to be big N, little n. It tells us this one is little n, little n. This one also is showing the trait, so it would have to have a big N. This is the dominant trait, and Dad could only give the little n because he's little n, little n. He can only give a little n. This one's also big N, little n. And so, again, it's like a test cross because this one's recessive. This one's showing the dominant trait, and it has some offspring that did not have the trait, some offspring that did have the trait, some did not, some did. So part of the time, Mom here was given a big N, and part of the time, Mom had to give a little n. This one had to get a little n from both parents, and this one had to get a little n from both parents. So we know that person number 1 here has to be big N, little n, has to be heterozygous. They're showing that dominant trait of having neurofibromatosis. Okay. And right here we have this parent is big N, little n. Married someone right here that we don't know for sure just yet. We know that they have that dominant trait, so they have to have at least one big N. Right here, person number 2. But then we have this child here who has a big N. This child right here has a big N because they're both showing the trait, but we don't know anything any further about whether or not they have one big N or 2 big N's. But then we have these 2 children who are showing the recessive trait. So this child had to be little n, and this child had to be little n, little n. So that tells us we know that Mom here had a little n to give them. But they got a little n from Mom, and they also had to have gotten a little n from Dad. So Dad would also have to be big N, little n. Okay, and all of these are not showing the trait, so we know that they're going to be little n's to show the recessive trait of having the normal fibrinogen. And I'll continue this in the next video.